Hello. All right. So I said last time that I would come back after I'd recorded a bunch of gameplay footage because like it's difficult to run two copies of OBS, one to like record the game and then have the game run decently and record decently. But the process that I ended up using is kind of iterative, where I did a bunch of kind of recorded a bunch of placeholder stuff, and then put some other placeholder stuff on top of that, and then more placeholder stuff, and so it never really felt like it was a good time for me to come back and finish showing the process of doing the streaming thing. So what I'm going to do instead is show off the stuff that I have made. It's kind of more or less finished now, but also talk about the workflow and where things came from and how we got to where they were. So something I didn't really spend a lot of time focusing on last time was the script, which was the first thing that I had. So if we come all the way back to my notes here, so I had some ideas for a trailer. Nope, that's not what I want. Nope, this way. Oh my goodness. Alright, so, and what is even going on there? Yeah, so had kind of a couple of ideas for different for different trailer ideas. Let me just turn that music down just a touch. There we go. I probably don't need it so loud in here either. Yoink. Alright, yeah. So before the game released, I wanted to do like a little teaser trailer to talk about the date that the game would be releasing, which is the trailer that's live at the moment. And I kind of had these sort of ideas for what a bigger trailer would look like, and in the interests of having something that I could establish very fast and keep it around the 30-second mark. I think it is. It's about half a minute, that first one. Sorry, I haven't had anywhere near the amount of sleep that I would like to have. I stayed up all night laughing at bad movies with my partner, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, so I settled on this kind of sing-along thing, which we'll watch now, and because that sort of sets some context. Alright, let me turn this back up. Let's come back over to one of these. This one? Yeah. It's a bit louder. So yeah, I come up with this kind of... Oh, hang on. Everything. Alright, now my windows are going to get pushed on the wrong monitors. Hooray. Oh no, seems alright. Yeah, so I came up with this idea of like doing a little sing-along thing, where as beats of the music came in, it would kind of grow, like show the words, as though you were singing along with the music. So just build a hive, gather lots of resources, grow that hive, make a new queen to keep playing. So the focus is primarily on the continue playing loop of the game, and just kind of showing the general construction stuff. So to record this, I played for about an hour and just pushed snippets of that one hive growing. So I think it's 51 minutes. No. Let's see if I can find... No. I'm terrible at being prepared enough to have this stuff all ready to go. Hey, Telly, how you doing? Oh, I'm quiet? Let me have a look. That's as loud as my mic goes. Uh, where are we? Media. Somewhere down here, I have a recording of the hive that I made for that trailer. Penguins, penguins. It's back from early December. I was making the trailer like right at the beginning of the month. There it is. I don't even know where this is locally on my system. Twitter compression, hooray. But yeah, so I played for about an hour and made this little hive without events being present, and I tried to avoid making like researching or building any kind of cell upgrades aside from storage in the throne room, I think. But yeah, I just want to show like a typical low complexity hive that was kind of focused on expansion rather than being super efficient with with anything really. just a sort of general generic hive, and that was a bunch of fun to record and do and have ready to go. For the so yeah, coming back to the other ideas. Wait, what is this? Oh, hello. Oh, I'm being hosted. Thank you. Uh, I'm like blind today. It's like it's early in the morning and you probably can't see it, but there's quite a lot of sun bouncing off the underneath the blinds and up into my up into my eyes, and the glare makes it harder to read stuff on this monitor, which is where I've got chat at the moment. So I might just shrink that across so that it's a bit easier to see. Yoink. There we go. All right. Yeah. So yeah, I came up with this kind of like sing along idea as a small gimmick that I could use to just very succinctly talk about what the overarching loop is. But I really wanted to have something that talked about or introduced the game world and its kind of weird character and the sort of bees having their own little personalities and little adventures through the vignettes and events, presenting a bit of a weird world as well. Um, no worries, dude. Oh, hello. So yeah, I kind of had these ideas of like maybe I could do like it's like in a world where there's lots of hazards, but there's also like intricate things and little bits of wonder and cute and sweet things going on, and try and frame it like one of those cheesy film trailers maybe. Um, but the amount of setup you kind of got to do in order to get to that point, and convey it effectively, I think requires a much larger time investment, and that wasn't really appropriate for the release date trailer. I also thought maybe it could like focus on this like bees don't live very long, and the main thing, that's the thing. Little lives contributing to a big generational community. Um, and that's kind of what I ended up going with for this. But it's been a pretty long process. I wanted to have this trailer done in time for the game's release in the middle of December. But it never quite came together, and it never quite gelled into the kind of thing I wanted it to be. Clunk. So yeah, so I went through a whole bunch of ideas. I had this idea of like maybe I could do something where it's framed as like a bee news report or something, and it's talking about all the stuff that's going on. Like, no, there's a bear attack coming, and there's all this stuff. But I just do it all on kazoo. And you wouldn't be able to understand it. It'd just be bzz, 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 bzz. And I think I might come back for that and use that idea for a later trailer. Depending upon how things go, I might do a little trailer for each of the major updates that are planned. And I think I can make that work. But yeah, so the first thing I did was kind of brainstorm ideas. I also I don't have it open. Started to scribble some storyboards down. Let's see if we can open those up. But there's really kind of not much. Not much. Here we go. All right, boink. And so I was just like, how are we gonna do things? I want to have a thing where you like zoom right in and it zooms in on the queen. The queen's like, hello. Um, which I will probably have on the table when it comes time to put more put more bee animations in, but not something I want to do just yet. But yeah, I sort of started with this idea of like, oh, I'll do some storyboards and move them around and stuff. But um, yeah, these never ended up being used or useful. For other stuff, storyboards have been helpful, but in this case, the bit where it started to solidify was when I started to write a script, and it was kind of sort of initially was thinking maybe like, oh, what if there was a documentary about bees and the intricacies of their life, if it had that kind of tone to it. So this has undergone a few revisions, but structurally it's pretty much the same thing, which is like it starts with some sort of bees, a lovely sentiment, and then this is I think it was Margaret originally, and so the idea was that it would pause and we'd use the inspection mode, and that would surface that feature for anybody who wasn't familiar with it. This idea that you can inspect individual bees and get a sense of what's going on. I don't support anything above 10.14 for macOS. Let me just grab a regarding Mac support. Here is a relevant post if you would like to read more. Yeah, so we show that you can inspect the bee. We show a vignette to sort of give that bee some character, and then we kill the bee. Hooray! Um, and then sort of talk about like, well, this one bee isn't the only bee there. There's lots of them, and they all work together and do stuff. And then we have like shift the focus to the queen, and then we say the queen's like, this is a new queen, and she's not quite feeling like she can step up to the responsibility just yet, because there's a couple of vignettes that talk about feeling overwhelmed by responsibility, and that feel like a good anchor to put down there, and then gave us the opportunity to kind of go, well, this isn't the first queen. This is like the third generation, and we can sort of do some quick flashbacks for events and show and sort of say that the hive has weathered through all of this stuff. And then yeah, that's kind of all of it. And I wanted to have some like stupid it was gonna be like, originally I think it was no matter what time it is, it's hive time or something like that. This kind of thing, and then it was the narration is interrupted and it's like, what? Oh, what time is it? It's hive time. Um, but then we kind of trimmed that down to just be, my, look at the time. It's hive time, and that that works well enough. It's not a great joke. It's pretty silly, but it's one that I think is likely to help the name be memorable. So people suck at remembering things, right? When you make a joke, or when you make a a bit of wordplay or something, it gives it a chance to stick in the mind a little bit more. And so when you go, look at the time, it's hive time. I feel like people who haven't quite latched onto what the game's name is, they go, oh, that game, Hive something. Um, Whereas now it's the second part of the name is tied to this joke, and in that way becomes a little bit more memorable, and we'll end up with people going, oh, what's that game? It's something time, B time. You can't win them all. But it's a way that I hope will help everything kind of feel like it all fits together and works well. So the next thing I did after I'd gotten this up and running, excuse me, was to do the flashback stuff. So I want to show this hive being constructed, and it has these kind of three major events that wither. or excuse me, that show up during the event. Um, the the approach that I used was pretty much similar to the that little time lapse one that I showed from the release date trailer. And my thought was that in the trailer it would actually be like a time lapse or a sped up version of the hive being constructed that would slow down for the events and then speed back up. But in the timeline of the entire thing, which is about a minute, it's twice as long as the first trailer. Um, it had to be so fast that it was almost impossible to read, and so I sort of abandoned that idea. But the thought was in my mind that when you first see the bee fly across the screen, it's flying across a hive, and then during the flashback sequence, you get to see that entire hive being built. And then when you come back to the present, we zoom out and you recognise that that it's all one hive, and you've kind of gives you that extra context there. Um, so yeah, I've got the video for that. Where is that? Is that here? It is here. So I think it's this one. Let's open it up in VLC. No, it's not that one. Let's try this one. Hey, there we go. All right. And I think VLC lets me play stuff back real fast. Hey, there we go. Boom. How fast does it let us go? Is it cumulative? It is. Hooray. There's probably a shortcut for this, but I don't know what it is. Let's get it real fast. Even faster. Brown. This must be fun to watch. I can't handle it. Alright. Let's slow that down. See if we can get slow enough that it doesn't dear. There we go, that's better. Yeah, so we had this hive being built, and it's like an interesting hive, and not super interesting, but well, there was a wasp attack event. But yeah, so recording this was not difficult, just a big block of time that I need to set aside to do it because I wanted to do 3 queens, right? But all up, I managed to do it in about an hour. And we'll skip ahead when we don't need to watch all of this. But yeah, I kind of grew it out and wanted to make sure I had redundant storage because it gives us more interesting stuff to look at and see what's going on. Initially, the 4 events that we were going to show in the flashback were the wasp attack, because I wanted to show that the wasp attack is like a normal event and not some weird combat mechanic that some people seem to assume is in the game. Want to make sure that there's less room for assuming that the game is something that's not. So there's wasp attack. The second one was outlaw slugs because that sounds kind of ominous, and it gives us a chance to show some kind of like animals doing weird stuff. Oh, there it goes. The third one was going to be a population shift thing, and in my mind, the most interesting of those visually is the they're all asking for tiny badges one, where they all turn into defenders. So I put that in, but it turned out to be a little bit confusing because it doesn't, at least in terms of what's immediately obvious from what you see. And this is coming back to when we had the sort of time lapse of the hive being built. It was a case of the bees dying after the event closed was the more visually interesting aspect and the bit that resonated more with the concept of a population crisis than the actual event itself. So when we pulled all the bits of time-lapse hive out, we just kind of shifted that across and showed a bunch of bees dying in real time rather than showing the event itself. And then the last event was the vine hopper scientist event that we saw just there. Which I'm not super happy with the delivery of the line, but whatever. So yeah, my sort of first step there after recording that was to then put all of it together into a timeline in Blender, which I will open, and we'll have a bit of a mess with it and see where it's at. So I think this is my first. Yeah, okay, not this one. This is before I assembled everything into a timeline. This is just the that actual raw footage with the events themselves sliced out, so that I could then mess with them. Trailer 2. Let's try that one. Nope. Trailer 2.3 then. Just because it's easy to mess up. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Yeah. So this is just looking at the responsibility. But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks. After I'd recorded all that stuff, I then recorded a temp track for the audio. So let's get Audacity up and hope that doesn't. Enough, and back on again, and then we should be back. Hooray! Alright. Yeah. Pulse loses its marbles when when a device is using the mic and then Audacity is open. So if I open recent trailer 2 script, here's a first pass on the audio for the narration. It's recorded with this mic, which means it's got lots of in it and a few pops. So apologies if it sounds awful. Oh, hang on. You get to hear me twice. What is going on there? Desktop audio is that one, thanks. Silly. Alright. Bees. Aren't they wonderful? This is Penelope. She's known for collecting leftover wax and making crayons for baby grubs. Penelope is a worker bee who works very hard to find and produce resources for the hive. The only problem is, bees don't live very long. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has friends. At the core of the hive is Queen Alice III. She's quite young and sometimes feels overwhelmed by responsibility. But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, weathered through population crises, not to mention their business with the rogue vine hopper scientist. Each bee might only be around for a short while, but together, their tiny little lives all help build a lasting hive. With typical bee productivity and a little of your guidance, Alice III and her descendants are going to do just great. Oh, would you look at the time? It's Hive Time! Available now on itch.io. Yeah, so I did like a little temp track that I could do the timing against, which we see here. I'm not using proxies for any of the video here, which means that it's probably going to like run slow and be jerky, but yeah. But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, weathered through population crises, not to mention their business with the rogue vine hopper scientist. Each bee might... Yeah, sync on that is awful. Because I'm not using proxies, it's like loading the video file in while it's trying to play it, and it's not great. Steve, I'm kind of done making the trailer, but I'm going through the process of what I did to make it. I wanted to make it on stream, but I ended up, just because of the way that I needed to record gameplay footage, that was awkward to do while on stream. You're running 2 copies of OBS, choose a bunch of resources, and you're having OBS record stuff. We just saw that we had audio problems when I opened Audacity to show some of that stuff. So wanted to keep that simple so that I could iterate through it nice and fast. But yeah, we had this kind of this was when the time lapse of the hive was being built. It is growing quite fast, but when we get to these later sections, there's so much happening. I think it's this one. Like the camera flits around fast enough that you don't really get a sense of the where it's moving to, what's going on. And so yeah, I ended up cutting that out. Which is kind of sad because it meant that I didn't really need to spend that sort of hour, 1 to 2 hours making that hive if we weren't going to show it being built. But it's not like a bad thing to have anyway. So trailer 2.4 is a bit more structured. Yeah, this is back when I
Survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, weathered through population crises. Not to mention that business with the rogue vine hopper scientist. Each bee.
yeah, it's also not. Why is that having trouble caching that? Hmm. Yeah. So this is when we'd pulled out the or I pulled out the time lapse stuff between these segments. And it seemed to like be a bit more punchy and a bit clearer, a bit more readable. And so when we have the population crisis, it's just like a whole bunch of bees dying right there. And that worked well. So once that was out of the way, I needed to then record the other bits of the trailer. What have we got open here? It's trailer 4. Yeah, let's grab 5. And here's where I started to it's still got all the old titles and stuff sitting on it. This is before I put all the wipes and stuff back in. So if you recall from the last stream, and I'll go back and we'll do this in the game in just a sec. I set up a bunch of things where it would spawn a bee where I wanted the bee to spawn, and then it would tell it to go to where I wanted it to go, and it would spawn a vignette at the right point, and it would do all the things so I could just kind of tap a button at the right points to make the right events happen. So, and that's what this code here was all about. So I'm like, rather than digging through the vignette list, which is just an array rather than any kind of key value pair that I can do a nice lookup on. The sorting isn't guaranteed in any way because they're all being randomized by the time we get to this point. So I just made a new one and activated it at the right point in time. And it's just like a really simple sort of state machiney type thing where we've got like an index number that gets incremented every time we run it, and then each time it'll do a different thing. So if I press the key once, then it will spawn the bee and tell them to start moving towards the storage tile. When I hit it again, it'll make the vignette for them show up. If I hit it again, it'll spawn a whole bunch of bees. If I hit it again, it'll move the camera to the queen. If I hit it again, it'll make the queen vignette trigger. So all of that is doing the stuff that it needs to do. Let's run that and see how it looks at the moment. I might stick this in a window just to keep it all looking nice. Sounds are probably a bit loud because I wanted to have the B audio a little bit more audible. So yeah, I kind of I didn't really have the timing down great. I just kind of guessed at it. I knew that I wanted to have the vignette spawn here, so we wanted to look at that. And then we wanted to have the bee die, and then she has a whole bunch of friends, a whole bunch of bees come across. At the center of the hive is the queen, and she feels overwhelmed by responsibility. And then I just kind of let it sit for a bit, and then zoom out to show a whole bunch of the hive. And that's basically the sequence that went through. I updated it so that the cells wouldn't receive mouse over events, because those are annoying and distracting for the kind of footage that I wanted to record. So it's not quite true to gameplay, but yeah, it is what it is. Oh, and I sort of did the mouse over thing on the bee. So and wanted to time it so that you go like, this is Beth. And so it made it look like the narration or narrator is reading the bee's details or inspecting the bee. So yeah, we come back into Blender and I've kind of hooked all this up.
Bees. Aren't they wonderful?
Ooh.
This is Penelope. Penelope is a worker bee who works very hard to find and produce resources for the hive.
Wow.
She's known for collecting resources for the hive.
I'm just stunned by by how slow Blender is when I'm doing this stuff while streams on. I'm just blown away. So I'm gonna just pull this down to 10%. We don't need to see it in a lot of detail to know what's going on, right? That should allow it to load a bit faster.
Bees.
There we go.
Aren't they wonderful? This is Penelope. Penelope is a worker bee who works very hard to find and produce resources for the hive. She's known for collecting leftover wax and making crayons for baby grubs. The only problem is, bees don't live very long. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has friends. Each bee might only be around for a short while, but together, their tiny little lives all help build a lasting hive. At the core of the hive is Queen Alice III. She's quite young and sometimes feels overwhelmed by responsibility.
So you might notice, compared to that very first recording that I did, I've reorganized things a bit. The stuff about tiny little lives now happens immediately after saying that Penelope or Margaret or whatever her name was has friends, whereas before it was after the flashbacks. So yeah, moving that around I think helped the structure of it a bunch, because you say Penelope has a whole bunch of friends and that's good for the hive, and then we say why it's good for the hive rather than asking you to hold that in your brain for however long after we go through all the flashback stuff.
But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, weathered through population crises, not to mention that business with the rogue vine hopper scientist. With typical bee productivity and a little of your guidance, Alice III and her descendants are going to do just great.
So yeah, I didn't.
Would you look at the time?
Hadn't worked
It's
on
Hive
any of
Time.
the end stuff at that
Available
point.
now.
But yeah, mostly this was about like, how is this working? Is it working well enough? Does the sort of having the inspect point at that point, having the bee die at this point, where is it, here somewhere? Is that working? And it all felt like it was coming together. Timing's not great. These bees were coming in too soon, and death timing wasn't super good. But this was my kind of make sure that it's all working before before investing a lot of time in trying to get everything right. And so what I needed to do was like sync up this temp audio with this temp video to get to a point where I could have a reference against which to record final audio, which I would then use as a reference. Excuse me. Then use as a reference for the final video. And this was why I didn't end up coming back to stream this stuff, because I knew that I would need to go back and forth a whole bunch. So let's open up. What do we got? This is 5. Let's grab 6. 6. Twink. And let's pull that back down to 10. Whoa, not that big. I made a mistake. Yeah. So I did want to come back and sort of show off the process. That is 10, not 10,025. And so at this point, so this is very close to the final one. And I've actually gone through and like added crossfades where it fades between the things, and then bees explode. And then crossfades help everything just a little bit. So let's come back and see if we can. Well, actually, rather than showing it in here, I can show it here. Hello? Maybe? Do I have Totem open? There it is. Where are you, Totem? Force quit then. If you're not going to work, you're not going to work. Let's open it with VLC. Play. Hello? Oh my goodness. I'm opening that off my web server. Let's not load that one. Let's load a different one. Yeah.
Bees, aren't they wonderful? This is Penelope. Penelope is a worker bee who works very hard to find and produce resources for the hive. She's known for collecting leftover wax and making crayons for baby grubs. The only problem is, bees don't live very long. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has friends. Each bee might only be around for a short while.
So I like this idea of when the bee dies, to have a gap in the music to make it more
Problem
impactful.
is, bees don't live very long. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has
Still haven't quite sorted out the timing, but bringing in the music sort of helps solidify it all and get the timing going well as well.
Each bee might only be around for a short while, but together, their tiny little lives all help build a lasting hive. At the core of the hive is Queen Alice III. She's quite young and sometimes feels overwhelmed by responsibility. But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, weathered through population crises, not to mention that business with the rogue vine hopper scientist. With typical bee productivity and a little of your guidance, Alice III and her descendants are going to do just great. Oh, would you look at the time? It's Hive Time! Available now on itch.io.
Yeah, so that was another step beyond that. I don't have like a nice save in Blender. But you can see down here, this is the music up to the point where bee dies and it stops, and then we bring it back in, and I ended up putting a fade in there. I think I got the fade on this one. Let's double check. Yeah, so we can see that the volume increases over time. I don't know how readable that is on the stream. Drew saying it's the first person that you've seen using Blender as a video editor. Blender's built-in non-linear video editor is it's pretty good. If you already know how to use Blender, the UI is pretty much the same, so you kind of don't don't have a big learning overhead. But the really cool thing, in my mind, is that you have immediate access to any scene. So, and I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about other stuff. At the beginning we got this like little bee flies out, and we got this hex wipe that it does, where it goes from black to reveal the thing in a hexagonal shape. These are Blender scenes. So if I go B and go to the default view, default view, and then B, we can see here that the B is just a 2D plane, and it's animated as a normal kind of keyframe animation. I can go into animated view, I guess. Is this a B? Yeah, this is a B. Let's turn off that background image because we don't need it. So yeah, if we step through, the bee does a little wiggle, and then flies straight off. And you can do all that. Anything you do here, as long as it, like when it's within the camera, that's what gets composited directly onto. So this is a camera here. That gets composited directly onto the video. So if we come back to video editing, and we go back to, is it hex wipe? Yeah, sweet. Keeping track of which scene, which mode is in, ends up being a bit of a nightmare. The hex wipe is the same. So if we go back to animation view and we switch to hex wipe, I've got this hexagonal shape here, and it starts all closed up like that. We progress through and we make it big, and that's just like a single bone here that has the inner vertices attached to it that I scale over time. Yeah, it's nothing kind of. Yeah, there's the graph for it, just a straight linear thing. And I use that as a mask. So if we go back to video editing again, and we look at this strip here, this is a meta strip, so it's a group of the audio and the video of this bee flying around. But if we scroll down here, I've added a strip modifier, which is a mask. and that's the hex wipe scene that we just saw in 3D. And basically, if we go back, excuse me, go back to that, we can see that it's white for the background and then black for the middle bit. If we go this way, this dotted line here shows the boundaries of what's visible, so you never see the outside bit, and it goes from full black to reveal full white. And when you have a mask, anything that's black is transparent, and anything that's white is visible. So we start off with everything black. That means that everything is transparent and nothing of the gameplay footage is visible. When we progress forward, everything that's white is visible and everything that's black is invisible. So we're like slowly moving that white area out to give us the sense of that kind of wipe happening, and it works well. It does exactly what I need it to. Same with the text and stuff. Is all all scenes like this. So we go to like here where it says available now on itch.io. We do a scale on the single bone. It's all attached to a single bone. If we go into animation mode, it's a bit easier to see the what the animation looks like on the bone. Can we grab the bone? Can you grab the bone? That's there it is. Yeah, so you can see here. Maybe you can't see here because it's red and impossible to view on a grey background, or at least very difficult for me to see. But I've got a Bezier curve here where I'm using a doink. It's got it's not a Bezier curve. It's got some automatic interpolation going on where it's got some easing, and it has a back thing where it uses cubic easing to overshoot and then settle. So that's why it gets bigger and then shrinks down just a little bit, and I don't have to do a lot of fiddling around with that. The text was a text thing, but you can't attach text to bones. You can only attach meshes to bones. So I just converted the text to a mesh and left it as it was, which is why it's this ugly geometry. Look at that, it's terrible. Those are like vertically offset slightly. You can't really see it. If I zoom in far enough, you can see that they are vertically offset from each other. It just stops Zed fighting. But yeah, so there's just like 3 copies of the text, all offset from each other, and yeah, just do some really simple animation with it, and that makes it look a lot nicer than it does when if it just pops in, So I just copied all this end screen stuff from the first trailer, and changed coming soon on itch.io to available now on itch.io, and yeah, that's kind of all the work that went into that. I recorded a final take on the audio. So this is 6. Rather than playing it in Blender, I'm gonna play it over here. So I still haven't recorded the final gameplay footage, and you can identify that. Oh, sorry. At the point that I exported this one, I still hadn't done the final gameplay footage. You know what? We just watch this one. Let's go with this one.
Woo! Bees. Aren't they wonderful? This is Penelope. Penelope is a worker bee who works very hard to find and produce resources for the hive. She's known for collecting leftover wax and making crayons for baby grubs. The only problem is, bees don't live very long. So sad. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has friends. Each bee may only be around for a short while, but together, their tiny little lives all help build a lasting hive. At the core of the hive is Queen Alice III. She's still quite young and sometimes feels overwhelmed by responsibility. But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, and weathered through population crises. Not to mention that business with the weird vine hopper scientist. With typical bee productivity and a little of your guidance, Alice III and her descendants are going to be just fine. My my, look at the time. It's Hive Time. Available now on itch.io.
Yeah, so that one had the final audio. It had what was the final footage, but I hadn't put the hex wipe on the beginning here, and there were a couple of other things I tweaked. The I also tweaked some volumes and stuff after this as well. The thing that's kind of like biggest standout change is that I added like a record stretch when the bee dies.
Bees don't live very long.
And that really helps that transition from music to silence back to music to play a lot nicer. There's also I think I made the fade in a bit longer and the gap between just to get the sort of comedic timing of it right. I added that so sad line in as well. And yeah, finding the right comedic timing meant padding that out a little bit. But since everything is timed to the music, and the music is stopped during that point, it was an easy point to like separate and move that timing around without having any big impact. So there's this kind of record scratch, so sad, and then when we start talking again, there's like those 3 beats. I want a very specific timing on. So let's have another listen to that with that in mind.
The only problem is bees don't live very long. So sad. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has friends. Each bee may only be around for a short while.
I think I may even have brought the luckily for Penelope's hive line just like a sort of a quarter of a second earlier, just to bring it in the final one. So yeah, now we're kind of looking at that. I did have some trouble here with the Alright, yeah, this is, let's, what's the nicest way? So the problem I had here with the bees exploding was that it happens immediately after the event, and we removed the event, so it was, when we put the crossfade in, the crossfade goes for, was it 15 frames, so half a second at 30 FPS. By the time that half a second was done, the bees had already exploded, and your brain doesn't have a chance to register anything other than there was a flash. So I needed to like have some stuff going on before that during the transition. The nice thing about the way events work is that the game is paused while the event happens, so I was able to just go, well, let's grab some footage from before the event, like up to the frame where the event triggers, and then mesh that up with the frame after the event is closed, and they more or less seamlessly match together. You can't really see it here, and I imagine that nobody will really see it in the final thing. But there is a mouse cursor. Where is it? I think it's around here, that just disappears between these two bits of frame. But it's like I was saying, your brain doesn't register that the explosions are going on because you haven't had time to process the context shift, and because that fade is still going on, you don't even notice that the mouse cursor's there. So I'm going to leave it there as a nice example of something that I could fix, but isn't really worth my time. Yeah, so I did some more timing tuning of the end here to make the
At the time, it's Hive Time.
Make the platforms show up in time with the music there.
At the time, it's Hive Time.
I don't know. It doesn't quite sync up when you're watching it in real time because of the way that Blender has to do the compositing. But if I export it, and we will watch that in a second, when I export it, it will all match up nice. And so there are a couple ways around that. One is to not stream while you do your video production stuff, because streaming seems to be slowing this down a hell of a lot. The other is to just change the start and end points to match a small part of the trailer and export that so that you can view it. And another is to use, let's grab a thing here, I guess. You can use a proxy, which basically kind of allows Blender to generate a temporary cached version of the video that is lower res or not so compressed, so as to reduce the amount of processing overhead in displaying it. I don't use them a lot because I only work on small things. Oh my goodness, my eyes are like, go back to sleep. You have not had enough sleep. Um, yeah, so I don't use proxies a lot, but they can definitely speed up this kind of stuff and reduce the overhead. All of the overhead for this particular section here is coming from stuff that's composited in. So we got like a whole bunch of transparent things. We got the little bee flying around. Where's the bee? You bee there somewhere? Yeah, there it is. So we've got the bee on this layer. We've got the platform list on this layer. This is the Hive Time logo. The hex wipe scene is still active, and that is the one that is doing yoink, that wipe that happens there. That's still active and is being composited against up to this frame here. So there's a whole bunch of things being composited together to make extra work for the thing. And so if I open up trailer 8, this is the final one with the final timing, and everything should be all super nice and beautiful. I've still got all the these strips here are hidden, and they're all like the old footage, and then on top is the new footage doing its stuff. You may have noticed in some of the earlier trailers when I was getting the timing right that there were sections of black. Those are distracting for anybody who doesn't do video editing, I guess. But for me, in terms of identifying that the timing is doing exactly what I want it to do, that is just not worth spending time on. Like, what I want to do is make sure that bee death is happening on with the right timing to make it properly impactful after in time with the voice. Oh, there's one other thing that I haven't talked about yet, which is that I had. Is it this one? Doink.
Bees. Aren't they wonderful?
Yeah, this one. So I ended up recording this like 4 or 5 times, the footage for this, throughout the process of making the trailer. When I got to this stage, and I had done the audio that I wanted, I exported this. I put this on my laptop, put my headphones on my laptop, ran the game, and timed all of those the movements and the sequences, the mouse movement and stuff against the trailer running on my laptop, and that way all the timing was right, so that I could get the very final version would be the very final version would have like I wouldn't I kind of had to have the rough one first that I could chop apart and get the timing right on, to know where things needed to be, so that I could then come back and use that as a reference for recording the stuff in the final version, which you were about to watch now. So let's take a look.
Bees. Aren't they wonderful? This is Penelope. Penelope is a worker bee who works very hard to find and produce resources for the hive. She's known for collecting leftover wax and making crayons for baby grubs. The only problem is, bees don't live very long. So sad. Luckily for Penelope's hive, she has friends. Each bee may only be around for a short while, but together, their tiny little lives all help build a lasting hive. At the core of the hive is Queen Alice III. She's still quite young and sometimes feels overwhelmed by responsibility. But her predecessors have survived wasp attacks, dealt with outlaw slugs, and weathered through population crises. Not to mention that business with the weird vine hopper scientist. With typical bee productivity and a little of your guidance, Alice III and her descendants are going to be just fine. My, look at the time. It's Hive Time! Available now on itch.io.
So, when I say this is final, I'm not expecting or intending to do much more in the way of tweaks. I might just touch up the way that the platforms appear to better align with the music.
My, look at the time.
It's Hive Time.
No. It's
Available
close
now.
enough to be functional. Because it's like it does a dum 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 dum, which gives me the nice timing for the asterisk um, bit to come up.
Are going to be just fine. Oh my, look at the time. It's Hive Time. Available now on itch.io.
Hmm? Oh, you want me to wear antennae? Here we go. I forgot to put my antennae on. So yeah, the music, like it is another step that I didn't really talk about much. So I knew that I wanted to chop it up here. Um, I sort of don't know. Oh, let's make this big so that we can see what's going on. I knew that I wanted to chop it up, and the record scratch was a great idea for covering up that transition to silence and giving something funny to hear when it's going on. But the ending, the piece is quite long, so that song is, I have it open here, this is Half-Life B, and it's 1 minute 38, so there's a whole kind of 30, what have we got, this is 1 minute 5, there's a whole 32, 33 seconds that aren't being used. So I just kind of grabbed the tail end because I like the way it ends.
It's fine. Oh my, look at the time. It's Hive Time. Available now on itch.io.
And when I do this kind of editing, it's usually not permanent stuff. It's kind of rough, and what I do is I will grab a section that's much longer than what I'm intending to use, and I will look for where the beats are, and I'll make sure that all the beats line up, and then play it all together and make sure that they match. If they're slightly off, let's make it slightly off.
Productivity and a little of your guidance. Alice the Third and her descendants are going to be just fine. Oh my, look at the time.
You kind of, it's really noticeable when they're off, right? Hang on, let me just bring these guys back, and I will hide this stuff so that we can mess with the music without it being a problem. Yeah, so let's come zooming on back in here. Yeah, so we only have frame level accuracy. It's still slightly off, but not enough to sound bad.
Will be productivity and a little of your guidance. Alice the Third and her descendants are going to be just fine. Oh my, look at the time.
Yeah,
it's high.
So that works. And then just kind of bring it back to reduce the amount of overlap. This is possible. If you're listening to it, you won't notice that there's anything wrong or different. It's very hard to notice that it's been...
A little of your guidance. Alice the Third and her descendants are going to be just fine. Oh my, look at the time.
It's hard to notice that it's been butchered like that. But there is this kind of abrupt bit where the tambourines are doing their thing, and then suddenly they're not doing their thing.
Oh my, look at the time.
The music at this point is picking up momentum and picking up energy, and then it suddenly is all smashed away. So I've passed this back to Peter, and he's going to go back to the original music and re-export it. How he chooses to handle that transition is entirely up to him. Maybe he'll leave it as it is. Maybe he'll do something different. I don't know. But yeah, it should. I think what's here is possible. If I had to ship a trailer with that kind of transition in it, I think I would probably be happy. I think I'd work on it just a little bit more and probably do a fade here, or maybe pull a piece from later in the piece that has less of a sense of growing energy and transition to that further back here. But yeah, the nice thing about having a composer who has all the bits and pieces on hand is that he can much more easily and much more quickly export another bit. But yeah, it's not too bad. as it is. I've been thinking about I might reduce the volume of the music just a touch, uh, or maybe push the voice into a little bit into the left or a little bit into the right. But I want to wait until I get that last piece of music back from Peter before making those kinds of changes. Just because they it represent a bunch of extra work to do twice when I get that music back. But yeah, it's I think it's perfectly fine as it is, or at least passable. Passable is what matters. You can spend an infinite amount of time on something, and that's not the right way. That's not the right way to make things. If you have to release them, or if you want to release them. But yeah, so this is more or less the final thing. I haven't done like a full res render. I only do it at 25% so that I can render it and check it quickly. But yeah, this is probably the trickiest trailer to nail down the concept for. Once I had the concept down, it wasn't so big a deal to assemble it. But just landing on the what the idea was going to be took like a month and a half, and that that was immensely frustrating. But yeah, what I'm going to do is when I release this trailer, I'm going to also simultaneously do a bunch of press outreach, and the hope is that it will result in a little bit more attention for the game. It's very difficult to judge or measure success. I'm at a point where I'm gonna write a big old post about. That's alright. You just mow your lawn. No one's recording here. It's fine. It's actually that sounds like it's a street sweeper. But yeah, it's difficult to measure success on a pay what you want title. Because if I go, I've had thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads, that sounds really good. If I say I've had only a couple of hundred sales, it sounds less good. So there's like a bunch of different ways that you can interpret it, and a bunch of different ways that you can manage success. But I think all of those things are intrinsically tied. There are people who download the game and then decide that they want to pay some money for it, or there are some people who pay, and it's I see this a lot. Is there are some people who pay more than the default $10 price, and they kind of balance out the people who pay less than the $10 default price, or people who pay for it may end up sharing it with other people who end up downloading it. And the ability to download it without paying for it allows awareness of the game to spread in ways that it otherwise couldn't. So there are a whole bunch of kind of interrelated aspects of success and performance that don't fit sort of conventional models of measuring success. And that's going to be an interesting thing to talk about. I always expect that there will be more people who downloaded it without paying for it than there are people who do pay for it, and that's fine. That's not really anything that I feel negatively about. But I would love to find a way to translate more of those downloads into payments, so that I can keep making games. It's interesting as well. There are other factors. People talk about free games differently from how they talk about paid games, and it's not something that a lot of people really shine a light on. But it does create a very specific kind of discourse, and it does create a very specific kind of response. And in my mind, Hive Time isn't a free game. It's a $10 game, but it's a game that is still available to you if you can't afford those $10. And that's kind of where I'm coming from Like I say, it doesn't bother me if people decide they don't want to pay for it, but if someone does present it as a free game, then that kind of bugs me because I don't appreciate that decision being made preemptively for someone. Like, I would rather that a prospective player had the chance to think about that when they're about to download the game, not when they hear about the game, if that makes sense. So when I see a YouTuber or a reviewer say that it's a free game, that kind of bugs me a bit. But you know, it's all a learning experience. I haven't done haven't done a game that's pay what you want with a minimum of 0 before. This is sort of new territory for me, and how to navigate that and how to set the right expectations has been a bit of a learning curve. When the game shipped, it didn't have the FAQ item that that talks about, that says, is this game free? And that's something that I put in after release. I kind of feel if I had that from the beginning, then maybe there would be less "this game is free" narratives floating around. But yeah, it's there now, and hopefully after this trailer goes out and I have a chance to do a bit more outreach, that won't be the dominant narrative anymore. That's the hope, anyway. We'll see. Who knows? But yeah, it's. I'm looking forward to writing about. I am both looking forward to writing about Hive Time's reception in terms of downloads and sales and that sort of thing. I am also not looking forward to writing about money, because I don't. I don't find money interesting or appealing. It's depressing. Money is not an enjoyable subject for me. So I have a very ambivalent relationship with that particular subject. But yeah, I am looking forward to putting something out there that talks about it. But yeah, so we'll see how it all pans out. But yeah, getting this trailer out is sort of the first step there. I am probably going to wrap up the stream now, because the trailer was going to be the focus, and we've looked at and talked about the process. Unless anybody has any questions about Blender and video editing in Blender, I'll finish things up here, and I don't know, maybe I'll come back and stream, just stream some games for fun, that aren't Hive Time related or whatever. But yeah, no, Blender's video editor is great, and it's nice to have access to a non-linear editor and compositor that can work directly with all of your existing Blender stuff. No, the non-linear video editor's been around for years. I've been using it since trying to think when I let me have a look. Let's see what my the first published video that I know of that I used Blender for. Yeah, so the first video that I edited with Blender that is online, I think, is 6 years old, by the looks of things. So it's been around for a while.